Okay, welcome back. We will now begin with the fifth session titled Gender, Culture and Soft Power. The session will be chaired by Professor Rekha Pande, former head Center for Women's Studies and former head of Department of History, University of Hyderabad. The first speaker of the session is Professor Pushpesh Kumar from Department of Sociology, University of Hyderabad, who will be speaking on transcending territorialities and broadening kinship, possibilities and limits of the politics of National Federation of Dalit Women. This would be followed by our speaker, Mr. Ajit Kulshreshtha, Additional Director General retired, Central Reserve Police Force, and former Inspector General, Rapid Action Force, who will speak on breaking gender barriers, women in policing. Our last speaker of this session would be Professor Aparna Rayaprol from Department of Sociology, University of Hyderabad, who will be speaking on women in Indian diaspora, complexities and intersectionalities. This will be followed by a discussion and a brief Q&A session. Some house rules. All the speakers and panelists are requested to mute themselves when they're not speaking. Questions will be taken during Q&A session. Panelists can ask questions to the speaker live through raise hand option. Questions can also be asked by registered attendees live by typing through chat box, both of which will be visible to the panelists. Questions may be kept brief and to the point. In case you're facing connectivity issues, you may switch off the camera and continue on audio mode. I now request Professor Pande to kindly conduct the proceedings.
Thank you very much, Kita, for that. I would really like to thank the Indian Council of World Affairs for inviting me to chair this session on gender, culture and soft power. And I'm very happy to see two of my colleagues, Pushpesh and Aparna, in this session. We worked for a number of years together. And I'm also seeing Swati Parashar, who's an old friend. So very glad to be here. Before I start talking about gender, culture and soft power, I thought, I would like to start with an old story, from the Jatakas. And, this is lunch time. It's everybody's tired. So I thought it would be nice to listen to a story. This is a very famous story and I'm sure many of you must have heard of it before. Once there is a fight between the north wind and the sun. Both of them are trying to show who is great. And the north wind says that, it has so much strength and it has so much power. But the sun was saying that, yes, it also is great, but its greatness is also imbibed with gentleness. And they keep arguing and they don't come to any conclusion. And finally, they decide, let's try out and see for ourselves as to who is very strong. And then they see a, traveler is walking down the road and he's wearing a very warm winter coat. And they decide, they say, whoever can remove this coat from this traveler will be the strongest. The sun also agrees. And then, the north wind blows, it blows very cold. It, lot of storm, there's so much of thunder, noise, there is such strong wind. And the more it blows, the man quickly, tries to wrap his coat much more strongly. And then, finally the north wind gives up and it is the sun which comes in. And when the sun shines, it shines with so much, there is so much of heat that finally this traveler removes his coat. And it is the sun which wins. And when the north wind asks, she says, I have so much power. How is it that you won this game? And the sun says, I use my gentle light. And that is the whole concept of soft power. Women can be very gentle. We can also, use it for different ways. Now, another very important concept is of culture. How do we understand culture? Culture is this whole distinctive spiritual, material, intellectual and emotional features that characterize a society or a social group. It can include arts and letters, modes of life, fundamental rights as human beings, our whole value system, tradition and belief. It also is a product of, how people interact, our whole places, politics and history, and how people react to our changing reality. Now, culture can be an enabling factor. It can be it could also obstruct. Culture and tradition can also be oppressive and liberate. It can also empower and disempower. So therefore, when we talk of culture, we talk of certain ongoing value judgments as to what to keep and what to let go, and what else we need to add. At many times, people confirm and reinforce cultural norms. They resist and challenge them. But education equips us to make choices and take actions on them. Cultural survival is very much based on resilience and adaptation. Whenever we look at the world today, all of us are familiar with hard power. We know hard power as military, economic might, and other changes with change. Hard power can always rest on certain inducements, such as, the carrot, or it could also rest on threads, the carrot and the stick policy. But sometimes, we get certain outcomes without tangible threats and payoffs. On the other hand, in politics, especially when we are talking of international politics, soft power is something, it is the ability to attract and co-opt rather than coerce. It is much different from hard power. Soft power uses a very persuasive approach to international relations. Therefore, it is something which is very non-coercive. The whole currency of soft power includes culture, political value, and foreign policies. Now, when we talk of gender equality, all of us know very well that, a country's prosperity depends on how gender equal that society is. Unless women participate in public life, they are not able to create a more open and inclusive society. In fact, if countries catch up on gender equality, we could gain by $12 trillion worldwide, according to some estimate. So gender equality is recognized as a global issue which requires a lot of international collaboration and exchange and experiences to achieve it. But today, when we look around it, we see so much of inequality. Though women and girls represent half the world's population, we have not really used their potential because there is so much of gender inequality which exists. And whether we look at it in terms of, girls, their rights to education, they are married young, they do not have any kind of rights, and there is no real empowerment in that sense. The best way to understand is by looking at the Global Gender Gap Report. In fact, the Global Gender Gap Report of the World Economic Forum 2020, it clearly states that unless women are actively involved, it will not lead to a greater well-being and better functioning of the economic system and the labor market. And it talks a lot, that whether we are talking in terms of the growth of female employment, reduction of gender gap, all this can only happen if we have gender equality. The Global Gender Gap comes up with its report every year. It started from 2006. It divides the world into 8 divisions. East Asia, Pacific, Eastern Europe, Central Asia, Latin America, Middle East, Caribbean, and we fall in South Asia. It is really sad that on the Global Gender Gap Index, India ranks 112th of the 153 countries that have been studied. And our economic gender gap is so deep. From 2006, we have not been able to bridge this gap, and it only is becoming more and more wider as time passes. Today, when compared to men, 82% of men are in the labor market and only 1/4 of the women are there. And the income also of women is so less. Our rank is 144th. And therefore, what is very important is if we can use of, ideas, convince the reluctance, and we can set new standard. It is the power to bring right actors together to pursue certain joint goals. It is the power to draw on the wealth of civil society, local communities, the private sector, so that we can establish a strong collective for joint action. Now, without taking more time, I would really love to listen to the speakers. And we have three very interesting papers in this session. And Pushpesh is talking about the politics of the National Federation of Dalit Women. Ajit Kulshreshtha ji is talking about breaking gender barriers in policing. And Aparna Rayaprol is talking about the Indian diaspora. I would, roughly we can take about 15 to 18 minutes for one speaker. And once all the three speakers finish, I would open it up for discussion and we can have a discussion on the various points which have been raised. So I now invite Pushpesh to make his presentation. Pushpesh is has he joined? Pushpesh is an old friend from the University of Hyderabad. He is in the Sociology department. He's established himself in doing some wonderful work related to queer issues. Pushpesh?
Sir, you have to unmute yourself.
Pushpesh, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now, yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so I just removed my headphone, then maybe there's some problem there. Yeah. Yeah. Hello.
Yes, sir, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm audible. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So should I start my presentation?
Please.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So I'm thankful to the organizers for having me here. And what I'm trying to do in this 15 minutes time, I'm sorry I'm also late because of some technical thing. So what I'm trying to do in this 15 minutes is that I'm talking about the trans feminist as well as localization of National Federation of Dalit Women within the territory. So National Federation of Dalit Women also went transnational, as well as it confined within the territory, and there was a connect between these two works. So how the politics of National Federation of Dalit Women has traversed commendably a territorialized and deterritorialized politics, and has always looked forward to forging alliances which scholars like Kalpana Kannabiran would call forging kinship with other movements based on sufferings and violence and material deprivation which is instituted historically. I basically highlight, based on others, how race, caste, and gender configured in the politics of National Federation of Dalit Women, whereas Dalit men attempted to transnationalize the sufferings of their communities by articulating a proximity between race and caste. The National Federation of Dalit Women added and even emphasized the centrality of gender within this context, within this. So in this engendering of transnationalization of Dalit feminism, the National Federation of Dalit Women appreciably went ahead in weaving intersectionality opposing politics of pluralism. So there is a difference between politics of pluralism and politics of intersectionality. And National Federation of Dalit Women tried to talk more about or emphasize more about intersectionality rather than politics of difference, and try to foreground descent, occupation, and gender, along with historicities of caste and racial violence, which brings the sufferers across national territories together in using platforms like United Nations to vocalize, re-strengthen solidarities, and broaden the solidarity of sufferers and lobby against injustices in the international arena. I then try to further broaden the scope of this forging of kinship and alliances within the context of intersectionality or politics of intersectionality by inserting within internationalist and transnationalization aspirations by incorporating non-conforming genders and sexualities primarily for two reasons. I bring in here and insert the memory of people have to mute themselves. Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you. Please
Can you hear
continue.
me?
Pushpesh, continue.
Okay. I bring in here and insert the memory of Kombahi River Collective, the Black feminist lesbian organization active in Boston since 1974 to 1980, which broadened the intersectional approach within Black feminist politics. In forging suffering-based kinship in international arena by articulating proximity and commonality of racial and caste experiences, the stance of Kombahi River Collective cannot be ignored. Secondly, both National Federation of Dalit Women and other Dalit feminist collective have to include trans feminist collectives and working class gender non-conforming women with writings, which appear in the writings like that of Maya Sharma, being lesbian in underprivileged India, and also with my own work on Kothis and Hijras and transgender women and men, as well as with, I also tell with a sense of deja vu, I surmise that a large number of these constituencies, and why I want to broadening this alliance and kinship of a National Federation of Dalit Women and other Dalit feminism, is that because with a sense of deja vu as well as experience of working among this community, I can say that these constituencies of trans constituencies belong to subaltern castes and classes and are appropriating Ambedkar and constitutionalism in their collective mobilization for justice. In Hyderabad city and Telangana state, there has been a sort of coming together of Dalit feminist and transgender groups, but there is a need for more dialogue and more interaction within and beyond territoriality. Now I'll provide a brief sketch of National Federation of Dalit Women and its attempt at transnationalizing sufferings through deterritorializing the politics by forging new kinship of sufferers based on available literature, and propose widening of horizon and opening its aperture to transfeminism and working caste, class, non-conforming sexual and gender identity, particularly belonging to marginal caste class backgrounds. A narrow focus on gender of the National Federation of Dalit Women and Dalit feminism both, I can say that a narrow focus on gender will limit the trajectory of intersectionality and broadening of kinship. It can further include age, disability to further visualize the sufferings both within and outside the territories. The Dalit women's movement first took specific organizational form with the creation of National Federation of Dalit Women in August 1995, in a month prior to UN's 4th World Women's Conference in Beijing in September 1995. This was no mere coincidence. Since 1995, Dalit women have taken advantage of a wide range of international and global venue to demand recognition of their oppression, identity, and human rights as citizens. These include World Conference Against Racism, WCAR, in Durban, other UN venues, the World Social Forum, and most recently, the first ever international conference. I mean, this is a little recent in the sense that it happened in 2006, not very recent. So the World Forum, which was the first ever international conference on human rights of Dalit women, held at Hague in November 2006. A remapping of caste as race in terms of discrimination based on work and descent in UN decisions, which now serve as a means of creating solidarity between Dalit women of India and other similarly situated women in Asia and Africa. The single most intensive mobilization of Dalit women in terms of a UN event was their activity prior to and at the WCAR in 2001. For the Dalit and Dalit women's movement, promised to provide the largest international event to date in which to have caste recognized as a form of race-related discrimination. What happened before, during, and after the WCAR served as a means of reframing the international debate on the discrimination on basis of work and descent, that is, as a form of racism. Racism has caused slavery, and both the Dalit activism and Dalit feminist activism always try to relate it with Phule's work, Gulamgiri, which talked about caste and slavery. Beginning in early 1990s, Dalits has begun advocating at the United Nations, particularly before the Committee on Racial Discrimination, for recognition of caste discrimination. But the dominant discourse at UN International Human Rights was silent on the issue of caste discrimination. In addition to work and descent, the National Federation of Dalit Women recommended that gender perspective should be incorporated in all aspects of convention, and intersectionality of the race, caste, and gender must be addressed. Moreover, the state must recognize Dalit women as distinct social group and make special provision for Dalit women in planning, programs, allocation of finances, etc. Outside of UN, for the first time at the World Social Forum at Nairobi in January 2007, women from Africa and South Asia met on a panel on combating the caste, descent, and descent-based discrimination in Africa and Asia. So since 1995, Dalit women have made many appearances in transnational venues other than those of UN, WCAR, and World Social Forum. One of the venues, the Hague International Conference on Human Rights of Dalit Women, held in November 2006, deserves mention as it was the first international conference on the discrimination and violence against 100 million Dalit women from South Asia, that is India, Nepal, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. Now I talk about Kombahi River Collect. So there has always been aspiration to internationalize the issue and play out in the transnational context and force new kinship and new solidarity with the suffering groups which have similar kind of or common kind of experiences of suffering based on slavery, racism, casteism, or caste-based discrimination, and foregrounding gender within them. So Kombahi River Collective, I think that though National Federation of Dalit Women highlighted women plights of Asian and African women belonging to certain social background based on race, caste, indigenous identities, I find Kombahi River Collective, who brought the issue of race, gender, and sexuality, remind it to the Dalit feminism, reminding Black feminism's commitment to intersectionality. And similarly, Dalit feminism needs to be reminded about intersectionality, and when they are aspiring to forge newer and newer kinship based on suffering, both in international context as well as in the national context, so territorializing and deterritorializing in both domains. So Kombahi River Collective's work becomes very, very important. The statement of Kombahi River Collective reflected simultaneity of oppression and refusing to rank oppressions. It was also anti-racist and anti-capitalist in nature. The Kombai River Collective statement reads, "We are actively committed to struggling against racial, sexual, heterosexual and class oppression and see our particular task the development of integrated analysis and practice based upon the fact that major systems of oppressions are interlocking." Material resource, and they also said that material resources must be equally distributed among those who create these resources. And I feel that Dalit women's transnational and local national mobilization should take inspiration from Kombahi River Collective and include gender non-conforming and sexual non-conforming entities to be truthful to the intersectionalist spirit. I quickly refer to Urvashi Butalia's 2017 article, which appeared in Guardian, which talked about the blindness of feminist movement towards transgender women who are more marginalized than women. She was raising this question, which toilets they should use, where they should sleep, because in Kolkata there was a combined kind of conference of a women's conference basically in which trans women also participated, and the question arose which bathroom they will use, which toilet they will use, where they will sleep, whether they will share the same space where women are sleeping, women are cooking, women are staying and share the same bathroom. And then Urvashi Butalia realized that how trans women and trans feminist issues are very, very important for feminist politics. And here when Dalit feminism is talking about intersectionality, I think transgender women's question becomes very, very relevant. I built my argument by using the narratives of a Dalit sexual non-conforming person who does not use the word lesbian, and she's from rural Tamil Nadu. The heartbreaking story from rural Tamil Nadu in Youth Ki Awaaz, entitled Queer, Dalit and Not Yet Proud, is revealing. By A. Angayar Kanni, I cannot pronounce the name properly. It's a South Indian name, Tamil name. Depicts, I'm sorry about that, depicts her dilemma of being a queer woman. She's from rural Tamil Nadu, which is not understood by her Dalit family, kin and community, while her Dalitness and poverty limit her possibilities of participating in queer life outside her family and her kin. So her Dalitness is not understood in the queer circle, and her queerness is not understood by her own family, kin and Dalit community. She says, and I quote her, "I have spent much of my life trying to forget the woman I loved. She took her own life as she did not want to marry a man of a family which her family was forcing her to. I am also a Dalit. I know that I have seen my brothers fight the Vellalar boys and not come home, at least not with breath. I know my ancestors were slaves, bought and sold between landlords. I know my parents, my cousins, my sisters and my brothers, they all saw me their scars. I saw them mine. I also know I am not wanted as a queer in my Dalit family. I am told Ambedkar did not speak of queerness, but I told myself Ambedkar likely did not speak of coconut trees or speak about coconut trees or cancer or predict global warming. So whoever I am not proud." And she's also mentioning to queer pride marches in the cities of India. This narrative represents the invisibility of queer Dalit women's voice, which as a politics of intersectionality cannot ignore. The Kombahi River Collective statement mentioned that rootedness in racism does not allow black women to separate from black men. Rootedness in untouchability and poverty would not allow Dalit queer women also to separate off and feel pride about her identity. but her voice needs to be given a due space in Dalit feminism, I suppose. The transgender communities in India have been actively fighting for justice since 2014 after the Nalsa judgment of Supreme Court. In their mobilizational tactics, they are appropriating Ambedkar as symbol and reiterating constitutionalism.
Pushpesh, can you sum
Yeah.
up? We have crossed 20 minutes.
Yeah. 2 minutes, only 2 minutes. On social media platform, they show concern with Dalit, Adivasis, farmers, women, children, disabled, etc. But I have realized from my own work among Kothis, a feminized masculinity within trans identity, that in provincial Maharashtra, that a fair number of them come from Dalit and Bahujan folks. Kothi is a subaltern identity. So I'm saying that these Kothi women, they come from certain social background, particularly Dalit and Bahujan backgrounds, because they cannot take modern identity like the upper caste, queer, non-conforming gender and sexual identity, take modern identity like gay, lesbian, etc. While Dalit communities cannot dispense with their women, as it is through the bodies of these women that the communities are reproduced, but non-reproducing bodies of Kothis, this feminized male or trans women, can be easily eliminated from the family and community context. So these Kothis and trans women are much more marginalized than Dalit women themselves. And, so it is important and pertinent for Dalit feminism, both in its trans-nationalized aspirations and transnational feminist politics, as well as when they are working within the territory, to not ignore the voices of queer Dalit women and queer constituencies and trans constituencies, which mostly come from Dalit and Bahujan backgrounds. And there is one transgender Dalit woman whose name is Grace Bano is articulating these concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pushpesh. I wish we could go on listening, but unfortunately, as a timekeeper, it is really, my sad job that I have to stop you. And I think it was really wonderful the way you tried to bring about this whole relationship between the National Federation of Dalit Women and then, how they have formed alliances with these different group and how they have forged these kinship alliance. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions to discuss. We'll have the questions at the end of all the presentations. Now I invite Mr. Ajit Kulshreshtha. He's the Additional Director General of the Central Reserve Police and he's the former Inspector General of Rapid Action Force. And he's going to speak on breaking gender barriers and looking at women and policing. I invite him to present his paper. You have 20 minutes.
Okay, Namaskar, madam. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, clear.
First of all, I just want to say thanks to the ICWA South Asian University, Ambassador Raghavan, Professor Chaturvedi, and Ankita for showing her boldness to pick me up for such an intellectual discourse. I think I am differently equipped, sir. I am not a scholar, and I won't be able to give anything which I have done as a research. My field was the actual field where I have worked, and I'd like to share some of my experiences of life when I have seen women coming with the power and joining us and doing better than what we could do. Firstly, I want to share with you that I always felt in India, we have a very, very rich culture where probably organization like us would not have been there to empower the woman. The woman gives power to the man. From tomorrow we have Navratras and we all seek blessings of Goddess Durga in one way or other, right from east to west and north. And our all goddesses, we had been having our names like Siya Pati Ram. It is not Mrs. Sharma or Mrs. Tandon. It was Siya's Pati Ram, means the identity was linked to the woman they were married or the Radhe, Sham, Umapati, like this. From that culture, somewhere something has gone wrong. We need to repair and allow the women to use their power. They're very, very powerful. The others who are obstructing their path have to be advised and trained to not do that. My experience in the forces was when I joined, it was all male showman, and there's nothing like women coming in. And I would like to give one experience of my young officer deployed in Kashmir in one of the election. During election, there was a problem, and I was geared out by all the women. I don't know what was the culture in Kashmir. The old ladies came and encircled. They didn't allow us to go. I was with only 2 men. With great difficulty, we could escape from there by using some tricks or something. We had nothing. We could not use power. We had guns, we had bayonets, and everything. But it was the issue, and we always felt there should be women with us to work with. Subsequently, the wisdom prevailed, and 87 we had the first all-women CRPF battalion. This was raised in Delhi, and its number was given 88 Mahila Battalion. This was something, a great thing which has happened, and this was the first time in armed police forces the ladies have come in a combatant role. Now the ladies are also coming in other so-called central police organization like BSF, CISF. You will find you are being frisked by the ladies at the airport. And all the forces are now having the women. They are now in army. They are now in all the armed forces. And Honorable Supreme Court has now said, okay, no restrictions. They can even fly the fighters. They are there. And now there are the ladies who have gone in the submarine as well. So the women have taken a good space in the armed police forces. Of course, in civil police, the women were there, but in a very small number. Some improvements are coming now that ladies are in more number, but sufficient. Their number is not sufficient at all. We had one battalion in CRPF, which came in 1986. And the other battalion came in 95. The policy was to have more Mahila battalion. We had been asking for 40%, if not 50%, Mahila battalions. Now we have 6 battalions, which has been raised. The last one has come in 2017 somewhere. So this is one issue. Now I'll give you one example of my first-hand experience working with the Mahila troops is that I was in Kashmir as a young officer, and the Kashmir problem had started. My job was to go in the night to do the patrolling and check whether officers and men are on the road. At one point in the downtown, I was fired upon, but I was lucky to have picked up that day a bulletproof vehicle. I survived and quickly came back because I never wanted these fellows to disappear from there. I wanted some more force. Incidentally, the Mahila company had come from Delhi. I picked a few girls from there. They went and I wanted to carry out such operation. When I was trying to move in, these girls grabbed me, bole, no sir, we won't let you go like that. They wanted to walk in front of me. I said, this is an area where anybody can kill you anytime. They said nothing doing. I realized that I was trying to protect them, whereas they, not less than man, bold, were trying to protect my life. This is my experience, and I was really shocked to see that the women whom we thought are not so strong were even in the field where they could have been killed anytime, were not dragging their feet. So this is one thing which I say that this was my first realization of their not only power, the guts, the boldness to face the bullets. Now, the next thing is which I would like to share is my experience of being with Rapid Action Force. When I was there, DIG, then we got one demand that there is a requirement of women police to join the UN peacekeeping operations in Liberia. Except for knowing as a general knowledge, we never knew what Liberia is. We were not following it up. Liberia had a problem of civil war which ran for almost 14 years, and this UN had come there to ensure that peace returns. The men were there, but not Indian contingent. The issue which was there in Liberia, that almost 93% of the women were sexually abused and 73% were raped, out of which around 80% were ladies pregnant because of these all atrocities. They were under mental shock, and around 50% of them were already in full bloom AIDS, and the male contingents were not of much use to provide security within the city. So Mahila Battalion, Mahila Company demand was raised. My boss went to MHA with the meeting with the Home Secretary, Home Minister, rings me up, there is an issue, tell me one thing, can we prepare our girls to go there? UN, I was overwhelmed, my girls going to UN? I said, yes sir. Kehta, bhai, pooch lo, check up whether the girls will be ready. I said, sir, don't worry, we will do something, you say yes and come back. So somehow that we got this responsibility to raise a contingent of Mahila, and when I tried to talk to officials, officers were ready, but at the constable, head constable and this level, the girl said, sir, how will we go and this and that all. I said, now this is a problem. So I did the job of Jamwant, what he did for Hanuman, persuading, talking to girls on telephone. Initially, a few 20, 30 girls said, sir, if you arrange for protection or something, we can go. But within a week, we had to select 120 girls to go, plus reserves around 200. We had more than 300 girls too eager to go. So this is how they realized their power. And we had to send the women. Sending women was, as far as professional competency is concerned, is not an issue. But we were concerned about that a lady with a small child or less experience or in the pregnancy, in the family way, should not go. But it was a very good experience of finally having them all, tested them and prepared. This contingent had gone to Liberia in 2007. In the 6th, the demand was raised. In 2007, this contingent had gone to Liberia and they were guarding the President House. They were doing patrolling. They were in Monrovia, the capital. I'll just mention that those days the president of Liberia was Nobel laureate Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. She took an active role, and it was the UN and it was the response of India which proved that our women, and I can tell you this was the first ever a fully formed armed police unit ever have gone in UN peacekeeping mission. And they were there for 10 years. I don't know after that whether any second chance has given to any other country, but we are always ready now. So these girls were doing it. They were absolutely independent. They were under the command of a woman officer, and I, as a back office boy sitting in the RK-Puram office, was just helping them out in whatever things they were to do. But within about a month or so, they were totally independent in handling everything they were. And after initial deployment, their hesitation was over. They started overreaching beyond providing security in policing and accompanying the local police in raids and searches, other things. They were utilized and they were so happy to go do the counseling. Our medical team was doing the medical test, and our girl became the role model to persuade. The Liberian government wanted to raise, their whole police was totally defunct and closed when the civil war was going on. Subsequently, the girls came very, very handy and extremely helpful, that they were making small camps in school, colleges, and going around teaching girls. And finally, before they have left, they have made that so many girls have already joined police, and they have been trained, and they are performing as good as our girls were doing here. So this was an international contribution of our girls, which shows that our women, coming from a rural background, probably her parents might have not allowed her to go and play in the field, or in-laws might have not done it. really proved their power if a chance is given. When the chance was given, they really proved wonderful. And one thing I would just like to show some of the photographs to give you some thing. Ankita ji, can you please help me? These are the girls, our doctors are providing medical help to the girls, and this is, they are managing some games and the crowd. You can see the commander, yeah. This is, they are going to the schools and taking classes and motivating girls. This is again a photograph of medical camp. Yeah, this is what they are giving guard of honor to the UN Secretary General. Those days, Mr. Ban Ki-moon was there. When he came there, he started talking to our girls in Hindi. They were surprised. Later I searched and I found he was in India. He knew how to speak Hindi. This is, they are doing patrolling and guarding a small procession in Monrovia. This is when they are going for a raid in that. This is the president, and yeah, this is the president, Mrs. Sirleaf, and this is Seema Dhundia, the then commander. I was there. I was lucky to have visited them. And that the other one is our DG, Mr. S.A.S. Ahmed. This is our photograph with our girls in Monrovia. Happy girls up there in. One thing, what that flag photograph is there, I don't know. Yeah, this is the one I would like to say some small thing about this. When the first contingent had gone, this is the way they came down. When we were preparing, when we dispatched our girls, we used to invite Indian media, but after attending the function, I was not able to see any images coming in or article appearing in any of the newspapers. Well, hardly anybody show any interest incidentally in Indian media. This is when this photograph was taken by UN photographer, and in the morning after dispatching them, I got up and got a call from my commander. Sir, did you see the photograph? I said, no, nothing. I have seen the newspaper today and heard the news. She says, this is the one photograph which has come in top newspapers in the world, and I could see this in the website of UN. This is something which I felt pain of, that Indian media never praised or showed our girls doing a job which was of an international higher level. Thank you. I would just like to add one more thing, ma'am. Our girls, when they were in Liberia, they have given the real taste of what Indian girls are. And they also, I mean, once we have this pandemic here, COVID-19, we had Ebola. The girls were there when Ebola has broke out in Liberia. And with the great care and everything, we survived. It was more dangerous than what we have COVID up here, but it was localized to that area. So this is my presentation, and I want to say one thing, that the government of India in principle had conveyed that they want 30% strength of the women. They're very powerful, they are capable, we have no depth. I've seen in my recruitments, in Calcutta I was doing recruitment, I had vacancy of only 10 girls. Please believe me, 26,000 applications were there. And when we conducted the test, more than 1,000 girls were absolutely good. I was at pain, what do I do? And they came from poor background but very capable. So somehow other we picked up the 10 best girls, and the rest were not given any opportunity. Came back to discuss with my senior, sir, can we have more girls to come in the forces? they had a lot of problems. So here you don't understand, ladies have so many issues that till date there are people sitting in higher position who do not want to let the ladies do their job. My recommendations to the panel, wherever you are, where you can influence, let us have more ladies joining the forces. Only thing is this, our finance ministry may be saying that we don't have money, but money in any case the government gives them if they are poor. They are fed, budget goes to keep them poor. If you recruit them, one family will not only be empowered economically, the future of country will be good. My recommendation may kindly be conveyed, and wherever occasion comes, let us do something positive while sitting on this forum. With this, I say thank you very much, Dr. Pande, Professor Pande. Thank you, Ankita, and thank you, my co-panelist.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ajit Kulshreshtha ji, for sharing your personal experiences. I am a resource National Police Academy, for the last 15-20 years. I have written a book on gender issues in police along with the director, Mr. Subhash Joshi. See, the biggest problem with police is, when you have more women joining, that is not the issue. But women who join the police, since it is such a patriarchal mindset, there are lots of issues when women who already joined the police do. See, if we look at the history of policing, police always, we have used it in the colonial period for, trying to quell rebellions, trying to stop dharnas, etc. So the whole image of the police is a very masculine one. One which is using the force, trying to stop the people. Though we have become independent today and, there are a different image which the police should have. It's very difficult to get over that image. And many women, whom I interviewed, Aruna Bahuguna and Tejdeep Kaur, and many of them were saying that, a woman has to prove herself much more than men when she's doing, because, generally, if a woman has to be given a separate charge, she's not given. They always have all these doubts whether she'll be able to do it or not. Though one of our students, Charu Sinha, is a student of ours, and now she is, the lead of the Greyhound. She has gone to lead those. So you have a lot of women who are working in the police. They are proving their capability. But still, in terms of mindset, when many of the men find it very difficult. This is what the women were saying. I think we need to really talk about these issues, but thank you very much. It was really wonderful listening to your experiences. I now invite another friend.
Before you hand over the baton to the next one, I just want to say something which I missed out.
Yeah.
When this topic came and I was collecting details and everything, when I left as IG of RAF, I said, once the girl come back, we will prepare a documentation, putting everything together, and we'll have a book or research paper, not research paper, the fact paper published. But it has not been done either by CRPF, RAF or MHA. Now I would expect or request the forum, Ankita Datta can give this task to someone to prepare. It can be a beautiful book, can be read internationally. And this is a legend for our Indian girls, and I would like to have it as best way as it is. And I just want to say one thing, when this was being done, BBC team came of almost 2.5 months, they prepared a documentary. Then I had a team coming from Switzerland, from Japan and other countries to write about these girls. But in India, I was not impressed with anybody's work. Except for UN Women, they came to help us at a later stage, and we got their support and help everything. And those days I was not aware of your organization. Otherwise, I think as a matter of foreign policy, when girls are going, this could be done. So if you find wherever you have occasion to see that we can do a documentation completely of this achievement and landmark work done by our Indian police girls. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I would really invite Aparna, a friend of mine from the same university. and she is going to look at the diaspora, women in Indian diaspora, what are the complexities and the intersectionalities. So Aparna, I invite you, and you have 20 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Pande. Thank you, Ankita and ICWA for having me here, and of course the South Asia University. Well, I think Pushpesh has laid out some of the issues of intersectionalities that I will be talking about as well. But the focus today for me is on women and the Indian diaspora. And here I would like to look at the migrants who became immigrants, who were earlier considered dependent at the turn of the 20th century, and then the women who have become the primary earners, the independent migrants, and those who have sponsored individuals from families and communities to new locations and opportunities. So in the 21st century, we see female migrants of all classes, races and religions and ethnicities traversing new terrains and taking leadership positions in society. So in today's talk, what I would like to do is to move away from an essentialist concept of gender, which looks at women and men as two opposing entities. But I would like to look at women and men as part of a continuum, and where people who have and we would like to see women who as people, not as women only, but as people who have tried to overcome inequalities and are often the unacknowledged backbone of their families. So what I will do is actually, I will look at women workers who have crossed borders for care work and service work, and those successful, educated, professional women who have excelled in their field. Since this is a panel on culture and soft power, I will also look at the ways in which women have taken on the massive burden of cultural reproduction quite willingly. The Indian diaspora has come of age in many countries, and one cannot ignore the ways in which this reproduction of culture goes through a transformation with every new generation. So my own work is something that has been talking about intergenerationality, and with each new generation, there is this kind of a transformation. So I will draw upon my own research on gender and generation in the Indian diaspora, primarily in the United States, to understand women's leadership and influence in social, political, economic, and cultural eras. So migration is a circular process, and we see many migrants coming back to what was called the original homeland. So there is, in this time, I don't think it is something that we can talk about unproblematically. We are talking about migration in a very, very complex way. So that is the broad layout for you. So I'll begin by saying that when I began my research on immigrant women in the early 90s, when I was a graduate student at the University of Pittsburgh, I was looking at immigrant women's experiences. The concept of migration was through the lens of the immigrant women. And there they have either been subsumed under that of men or have been completely ignored or misrepresented. They were treated more as migrants' wives rather than as migrants themselves. So women have either been left out of the academic studies as well, or as early South Asian migration says, they have been referred only to the bearers of tradition and the transmission of culture. However, that critique is no longer accurate to say the portrayal of women in the diaspora or any academic discourse is the same as it was 50 years ago. But I have to put on the table the fact that historically, of course, women have been left out. There is no two ways about it. So, but then we moved on, and since the last decade of the 20th century, since the 90s, there has been a spate of academic as well as creative writing on, by, and or about women in the Indian diaspora, more specifically South Asian women in the Indian diaspora with all their intersectionalities. So many of these kind of work, they also draw from, the South Asian Descent Collective, that kind of work. And all these have hyphenated identities if they are in the United States. South Asian was the immigrant. Asian American became the settler, or what we call the second generation. So with the second generation, it's a hyphenated identity, and we can no longer own them and say they are Indian and then look at them through our essentializing eyes of racism, saying the color is the same, why are they not behaving that way? But the fact is they are as American as others. So there is this whole kind of discourse of interraciality or interracialism that goes on. So there is the questions of both location and dislocation. So these, particularly of dislocation, we are talking about the intersections of race, color, and gender. And sometimes they overrule the class advantage that some of them may have had. So that was in the United States, of course. But I think it's very, very crucial to look at these differences and these kinds of proofs. So let me first dwell on what we have called the workers who have gone. Saskia Sassen has been talking about the caregivers, the care economy, when we look at the women migrants, the female migrants who have crossed borders primarily because they see that they are the backbone, they are the support of their families. One of the very interesting essentialist points of discussion is women are primarily responsible for taking care of the family. But that care does not often include that they are also responsible for the economic burden of the family. There are several women whose husbands, if they are married, or these are women who have been abandoned. So our statistics of divorce are very, very inaccurate because you have a lot of people who have been abandoned. And when women have been abandoned, they fall between the cracks, So in that sense, these are women whose lives are very, very important because they take on the burden of family responsibility, which is the financial responsibility. How do they do it? They do it by migrating, maybe as sojourners or temporary migrants, not as settlers very often, but with the idea that they would do it. So I would like to focus for a little bit on those women who have left their own families with their own families. That is, their caregivers of their children, maybe their parents, but they go as domestic workers or caregivers when they cross the border. A lot of women in Philippines have done that. Filipina women have gone to Canada. And if you look at the economy of Philippines, the remittances that come into Philippines are the largest contribution. And of course, it doesn't take a genius to guess that women are the primary contributors of the economy over there. So our data also does not tell us how much women contribute to the nation in terms of remittances very often when they go out. So South Asian women too, from Sri Lanka, they go to North America. From South India, we know historically we have Professor Pande over here, but we know that the work of Tejaswini Niranjana and others have looked at plantation workers in Trinidad and some of the other Caribbean or West Indian countries. And over there, these plantation workers were not seen as workers, but they were only seen as extension of what was going on. So this whole critique that women's studies has had of invisible labor, our diasporic women were very much part of this invisibility in the first generation. That is something that we need to understand. What were they going for? They were going for that title of that article, that came in Arlie Hochschild and Barbara Bryant book that was called Nannies, Maids, Sex Workers. They could be going as nannies, they could be going as maids, and they were used as sex workers or abused in that domestic context, because first of all, the passport is confiscated, right? So there is they are on very thin ice because they can't come back home, and they are in one sense the homeless because their passport has been confiscated. And the only thing that they can do and they can exercise the power is by remitting that money back into the accounts into the home. So there is Praveena Kodot and others have talked about women workers from Kerala to many Gulf countries, and my own student Anushama Mukherjee and I have talked about Hyderabad, the Barkas, where a lot of women have gone as migrants to different Gulf countries, and they themselves are very often engaged in different kinds of caregiving. So what I'm trying to say is that while the service work and the care work is what sociologists have traditionally called emotional labor, you know, the concept emotional labor came from this very fascinating account of flight attendants who have to keep smiling at the workplace. Another student of mine has done a study on shop floor workers in a shopping mall in Hyderabad. These also are very often migrants. And they also indulge in, that beautiful smile they have to give you. But they enter through the back, through the service entrance, which is dark, dingy, and dirty, unlike the flashy entrance that you and I as customers are entering. So where are these workers and what exactly are we doing? So the migration and diaspora, very often what happens is when the first generation goes out and they begin to migrate to the other lands, they begin to resolve and look at a very, very different kind of life for the next generation. So their second generation can hopefully migrate for better education. So this is the service class. This is the care worker that I was talking about. Historically, the indentured laborer, later on becoming the care worker. I'd move on from working class to middle educated middle class, on whom I have done my earlier work also. And I would look at the 1964 Act of the Lyndon Johnson presidency in the United States, which welcomed the professionals from many countries. As you know, we had a major advantage of that because we are an English-speaking post-colonial nation. So English education from our country allowed several people to migrate in the 60s. And they became what we call, as Alexander Portes has described it in the, Immigration Act, it is really the first generation. So first generation migrants migrated as professional classes. And what I started with, the dependent migrant very often was sometimes the woman who went as the spouse and migrated, but ultimately she herself began to get, she was already educated in India, but she probably took on it. If she had done her engineering at IIT, she probably did her master's in an American university and joined the acclaimed IT industry that we have today. That is an extremely common trajectory for a lot of the women who went at that particular time. But apart from that, along with the men, women have also excelled at medicine. There are several women of the first generation migrants who are doctors. And when I did my study, I saw that many of them are anesthesiologists by day, but at night they would come to the temple in Pittsburgh and engage in what I call cultural reproduction by providing the surrogate extended family, wanting their children to learn music, dance, and what have you in that sense. So very, very much articulate, very, very much wanting to see, but also saying, why are you talking to me? Talk to my children. I want Indianness to be in my children. So this was the first generation immigrant who was taking on very, very willingly the burden of cultural reproduction, and the result of which you see today in the Indian diaspora when you see as wanting to embrace Kamala Harris, wanting to look at her idlis and her dosas, and wanting to look at her Indianness tomorrow. If she becomes the vice president, we also want to own her Indianness in that sense. So it's an absolutely fascinating kind of trajectory, but it's a bit different because Kamala Harris is already 55 years old, and her mother was one of the very early immigrants, upper caste South Indian, very, very highly educated, went again to one of the premier institutions, but not a common entity in the 60s. Right? Shamala Gopalan went in the 60s, met the Jamaican spouse, but in a very different kind of, what should I say, scene and very different trajectory. But the reason I bring in Kamala Harris is for this, is to showcase the Indian American. You have several of them. Then to showcase also, you have, until recently, we had Indra Nui, the PepsiCo chairperson, who was one of the richest Indian American women in India. Now, I'm not here only to showcase, but I want to tell you that if
Aparna, can you conclude? Can you conclude?
Yes. Yes, sure. So I want to just say that if we want to look at these women, we are definitely looking at those who have done very well as doctors, as engineers, as IT workers, and their children have the privilege of the second generation. But what I want to do about bringing my whole talk together is the layering that goes on, the intersections of caste, of class, of course. You see that I do not want to pose men and women as being extremely distinctive, because I think patriarchy is something that can be propagated by everyone. So here we have, a second generation which is being raised hopefully by feminists, both male and female. And so that whole trajectory of power and inequality hopefully will be bridging that gap, whatever that class may be. So, yeah, I think I will conclude there and continue more if there are questions. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much. All the three papers in this panel were very interesting. We started with who was looking at the whole National Federation of the Dalit women, and then he brought out the differences between transgender women and the Dalit women, and then showing what were the differences. Ajit Kulshreshtha was talking about his own personal experiences, how more and more women were joining the police, and Aparna was talking about this whole question of trans, looking at these diaspora. And you rightly said, if you look at many of the studies, at least before 1970s, they are so gender blind. We somehow assume that the migrant is always a male, and there are very few studies on women. And I think this was a very interesting study where she's looking at these different level and layers of women. I now open this for discussion, and please introduce yourself, and you can ask your question and to which speaker you are directing. Please point that out also. So questions are welcome. Since people will warm up, I can start with a question, Aparna. I think it is very interesting when you're talking
in the chat box. Yeah.
Okay, so when you talk about these women, see, there is a lot of expectation from the first generation that they have to carry forward the Indian values and cultures, and these children who are born and brought up in that foreign land, I think that tussle is always there. I'm sure you're aware of this. You call something called the ABCD, American born, confused, Desis, so there is a lot of push and pull factors that operate, and there is a lot of tussle, especially for the young generation of these women. How do you look upon that?
Do you want me to answer it right away, Rekha?
Yeah.
Yeah, so actually, I've written elsewhere that I completely disagree with the concept of the ABCD because I think we on this side are more confused when we talk about them. My study on the second generation shows that they're absolutely comfortable with their hyphenated identities. There is a lot of intergenerational tussle. I agree with that, but I think they tell their parents very clearly, we are American of Indian origin. We are Indian American in that sense. And there is no confusion there at all. The confusion, I had a very interesting experience intergenerationally. When my earlier study was with first generation, they were struggling, talking about identity, trying to frame themselves, trying to see what they have to do. But here, I think it was a very, very different contrast with a very confident second generation. People who are today in their 30s and 40s, I think when I had talked to them, they were in their early 20s and they were so confident and they said, yes, we will see the future and we know what we are doing and where we are going. And if we go back to the country of my parents' homeland, it is my parents' homeland and I take a lot from it. But my home is the multiple home and that is what we see in the return. What we call the reverse migration.
Yeah, thanks. I can see a question. Vibhuti, why don't you unmute yourself and ask?
Yeah. I think my question is to Mr. Ajit Kulshreshtha. Do you have regular and consistent gender sensitization programs in police, CRP, SRP, BSF? And what is the course content? Because I remember in the 90s, there was a lot of enthusiasm about it. But 30 years down the line, what is the reality?
Yeah, ma'am, thank you for the question because when actually I have already hung my uniform in 2014 and when this Mahila battalions had come, the sensitization was an issue with us that our men were not trained.
Ankita, you're calling me?
They were not trained to
I just came
work
back.
with the
I was in the fix. Okay.
women force. And we started gender sensitization right from 87 onwards. It was part of the curriculum and we had been inviting a lot of guest lecturers. Of late, when our contingents were going to Liberia and the girls were coming in forefront, it was being done very regularly, especially when I was in Rapid Action Force where the men and women work together. Like we have the men battalion, we have women battalion, but in Rapid Action Force, they all work together. So there in Rapid Action Force, at least as long as I served, it was for almost 7 years as DIG and then IG, gender sensitization and human rights were the subjects which were taught and we tried our best that everybody is reasonably sensitive. And I can also make you happy by saying that this efforts was really good and our boys and girls have behaved very well. After that, they become much more civilized. I remember comparing my days when I joined as a all-male force and when I left, when girls and boys are performing cultural program together in RAF. If you have an opportunity, go and just see the quality of things they do and the way they work together. It is absolutely wonderful. Like a family, they work. And of course, we are always there to take better inputs to make our man more cultural rather than rough. Rekha ji, I would just like to add that the police have started using the soft power and it is there. The soft power means that you as a good human being can motivate and control even the crowd, which I have done as an experiment in my life career. I had a professor when in the academy that it is not always the lathi or gun which is at your hand. It is your wisdom, your alertness, your presence of mind which can do that. Even in controlling the crowd, I as a young officer picked up the boys and girls from the crowd and I disappeared. They controlled the crowd for me. So these are the ways we have to realize how many powers are hidden with us. And people like you can always bring them out and we can use them for the good of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Swati, I can see a question from Swati Parashar. Can you unmute yourself and ask?
Yeah, thank you, Rekha ji. Great panel. I mean, the range of presentations are simply amazing. Aparna, I had a quick question. I mean, I really enjoyed listening to you because I think much of diaspora studies is now, sidelined, and we are only talking about vulnerable migrants in some sense. Migration studies has proliferated in Europe. So I think going back to, how people migrated and different classes, very interesting. I just wanted to know if you had done any layering in that in terms of class migrants, because, the plantation migrant stories are very different in the Caribbean and also in Sri Lanka. Actually, if I can talk about the Tamil migrants there, on which I did some work. And then, of course, the middle classes, how they migrate and, so on and so forth. So if there's layering in that study that you can draw my attention to. Ajit ji, I really, really appreciated your presentation because very often we forget to talk to people like yourselves who are, really on the ground doing this work. It's one thing to just keep talking about feminism and gender sensitivity, but you're right there on the ground doing this. And that I think everybody appreciated it today. I just had a quick, I agree with you about documentation, and some of us would be, I'm sure, interested in that. I do know that a lot of foreign scholars have written on this mission, particularly without actually perhaps having access to people that they could to write these stories. But obviously, it's generated a lot of interest. Quickly, I wanted to know what are the resources that the police, the paramilitaries in India, they're quite, the bad stories come out really quickly. The real good stories of women, being part of this. What do we do in terms of resources, generating more awareness to make not just women be part of these forces, but also to, to impart some kind of gender training and education to men, and that is the problem. So what is it that you would like? What is your vision for this space? Thank you.
Right, Swati ji, within the forces, we had the instructions from the government, and this gender sensitization has already been there at least in the central police organization. I object to call it as a paramilitary. I don't know. We are never military, but of course we can go to the borders to fight in case if required. Yeah. And this within the forces, this is part of it. I know armed police forces. In the state police, I think if it is there, it still needs to be done in a better way. It requires some more things. The other things is why only gender sensitization required with the police. It is required to be a part of understanding by everyone dealing with anybody else than the family, even within the family. So I've been always a person who liked that in India, we should always have something like NCC or RSS or something, Scouts, Bulbul. It used to be very popular things when we were growing up. It is now not up to that mark. Recently, Modi ji had said we will try to have 1 lakh more students joining NCC. I think it should go into crore. Everybody, whosoever is growing up in India and doing studies, must undergo such type of training for a small to medium duration course. And I would like that the gender sensitization, which was actually our heritage, has been forgotten by us. It should be done as a curriculum in the school. And I will say that there should be some physical training like NCC or NSS or some sort of thing. It should be compulsory for everyone in India. And I can tell you one thing, all those who have done NCC had always been proud of undergoing such type of training when they grow up. Like Modi ji also did it. Sushma Swaraj used to be very proud of saying that she was in NCC. And I know all the girls who have undergone such type of courses are better off. At least they are very confident and they are always proud of it. So as a part, extending this sensitization, it is required in every walk and fields of life. It should be there in school as an extracurricular activities. And this is my recommendation. If we can do it, we must do it.
Thank you. Aparna, you would like to respond?
Yes, please. Swati, 2 things. Obviously, the panoramic view and the romantic view of women in the Indian diaspora cannot actually be a realistic view, and the layering is very, very much there. And the studies, especially post 90s and in the last couple of decades of the 21st century, are very aware of these kind of workers. Like, for instance, now you have the global worker, no? You have Reena Patels working the night shift. They may be working in Mumbai, but they are call center workers. They are working in the international workspace. So there is that kind of the global worker or IT worker also who you need to look at, and what are the health benefits. And today in the world of, health pandemics and everything else, who's getting the short end of the stick. So historically, yes, there has been work on the plantation workers, but even in the contemporary times, the work on the maids, and of course in the US, the tendency has not been so much, but then this last 15-20 years or so, I think one has been looking also there's a very interesting film by somebody called Prajna Parashar, which came about in the late 90s, about this, as she calls herself, the widowed woman from Gujarat who came and started making puris on Devon Street in Chicago. And, because she was staying with her daughter and she did not want to be dependent on her. So she spent her entire time, actually, so she never is part of that, immigrant dream in that sense. But those are the kinds of people, the women who are working in the Patel motels, who are behind the scenes and who are cleaning and everything else that they are actually doing. So it becomes a family business. So there has been, Usha Jain has worked on, the Gujaratis of San Francisco also long ago again. So there have been several of these kinds of studies which are extremely conscious of the layering, and we don't really do that kind of sweep. I hope, that makes sense.
Thanks a lot, Aparna. I can see another question by Dhruv Jyoti Bhattacharya ji. Is she around?
No, ma'am, it's from an attendee. So we would have to read out the question.
Okay. So her question is, Dalit, Pushpesh is not around. Is he there? This question is to Pushpesh, so I can't see Pushpesh. You're there? Okay. Pushpesh, her question is, Dalit women activists are trapped in an unenviable position within the twin structure of caste and patriarchy, both of which speak to database about group boundaries and honor. How successful NFDW has been to bridge this gap? Pushpesh. Yeah.
Can you read the question again?
She is talking about, how there is the Dalit women are trapped in this unenviable position between the two structures of caste and patriarchy. Okay. And then she says this whole concept of debates about group boundaries and honor. How successful is the NFDW being able to bridge this gap? She's talking about this caste and patriarchy. Has it really done something to bridge this gap, this federation? The National Federation of Dalit Women, has it worked on this issue? Trying to bridge the gap between caste and patriarchy?
Yeah, I think so that National Federation of Dalit Women have worked both within the national boundary as well as in the international arena. And they have been, when the Dalit men emphasize a proximity between race and caste, so that the movement of the Dalit and sufferings of the Dalit will have more sufferers and more visibility in international arena, through which they can put a pressure on the national government, etc., etc. The Dalit women have foregrounded gender within, and they are saying that it's an interlocking system of hierarchy, which you have to take the Dalit feminist perspective to an intersectional perspective to look at it. So they have more invigorated this whole concept of oppression, suffering, kinship, etc., and moving beyond the territory and deterritorializing it. I think they have done the job. And recently also, Ruth Manorma is talking about the Hathras rape case, etc. She's reacting. Dalit women are reacting, so they have done the job, and very beautifully they have done the job. They have been emphasizing on slavery, for example, and emphasizing on Phule's work and Ambedkar's work, and trying to connect it to race and gender, black feminist work, etc., etc. So they have done the job, and they have also been very actively mobilizing against. But the only thing which I highlighted is that there are a lot of trans women and trans men and trans constituencies and queer women who also belong to Dalit communities. So, the National Federation of Dalit Women and all Dalit feminist groups have to take an expansive view of gender. The gender is still binary. And in Hyderabad, there has been an experiment where the trans women, the Dalit trans women, and the Dalit feminists have come together at certain junctures. That needs to be more reiterated, and more alliance need to be forged between the trans feminism and Dalit feminism to be truthful to what I call intersectionality. And further, I think the sexuality and disability feminism, age as a factor, these all have to be addressed and included within Dalit feminism, and also feminism in general. This is what I would summarize.
Thank you very much, Pushpesh. I think we are running out of time. I have one more last question for Ajit Kulshreshtha ji. This is again by Dhruv Jyoti Bhattacharya ji. And the question is, what kind of reforms are needed in the Indian police forces to accommodate more women in police services? And second part of the question is, what are the constraints? She's asking in terms of what reforms are needed and what are the constraints so that more women can join the police force.
The first question is this, that there is already a requirement. There is no dearth of resources in India. Only thing is this, the political willpower, which has shown little bit, but is still more to go. 30% of the police force should be women, has been taken as a issue in principle, but on the ground, I don't know how much time it will take. I have my friends sitting there with different way of thinking and ideology. And other thing was the constraint. I don't know what is the constraints. Resources with the government is absolutely unlimited. We can create resources, though constraint is nothing which should stop in India the women to come. The only constraint could have been that we don't have capable girls to join in. It is not. It is a resource, very, very big resource, which needs to be tapped and which has to be utilized. It is not only good for them in their family. It is not only good for the forces. It is not good for the public to have more women coming and dealing with the issues like that. It is very, very good for our new generations to come. At least if we have 30 more battalions, means 30,000 ladies working, means they have changed their way of life. They will come out from poverty. They will make a very, very good wife, very good mother. And the generation, new generation India is going to be better. It is better. It's an infrastructure development. I would say that it's going to have a rolling role that it will keep on improving the life of people to come. There will be more. I know those who serve the forces generally become more civilized. So what is wrong in having them? Resources, no constraint. Desire is there, requirement is there. It's a question of just getting it implemented. We will continue to force till we have up to 50% women joining all the services.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Ajit Kulshreshtha ji, for that explanation. And I think we are now at the end of this session. You'll agree with me that it was a really wonderful session where we were supposed to have 4 papers. I wish Rajulben from National Commission of Women, because her paper was on gender and violence. She was looking at this whole issue of violence against women, but unfortunately she could not present. And I'm really grateful for the 3 papers that were presented. Pushpesh really brought out this whole question of the National Federation of Dalit Women and how they are bridging these gaps, forging kinship alliances and trying to bridge the international boundaries. And he was also talking about how, again, within the Dalit feminist women, you have a group of transgender women. And again, he spoke of the various differences. Ajit Kulshreshtha ji was speaking from his own experiences. He gave us a lot of examples of the kind of work these women were doing. So, there is a lot of potential. I think we need to really tap this potential. And if more and more, the moment we have more and more women joining the police force, it is going to change the whole character of policing. Aparna's paper was, primarily talking about these diaspora and women. And she was not looking at this whole essentialist concept of gender. We're looking at men and women as 2 separate categories. But she was also looking at these whole, group of the unacknowledged women who are the backbone of the families. And she really brought out very clearly the different layers and the levels at which all these women work, the kinds of constraint. And I'm really very thankful to all of you for giving this opportunity, and I'm sure everyone will agree that we have benefited a lot from this session. We have learned a lot, and I was really very happy to see old friends Vibhuti and Swati being present here, and I think we can only meet virtually now. So Ankita, thanks a lot for bringing us together in this panel, and I would really like to thank the organization and all of you. Yes.
Definitely.
I would like to thank Professor Pande for chairing the session and all the speakers for their wonderful presentations. We'll now take a short break and we'll join back at 15:45 hours for our panel discussion.
Okay.
Thank you.